Welcome to the Kernel. Our guest today on our first episode is Muggie van Staden. And our podcast is really going to be about sharing not all the solutions, but certainly talking about some of the problems that are facing us and challenging us in the world of technology and open source.
Yes, and it's going to be an amazing conversation, I think, and you're going to have some amazing guests. But our first guest today, and I, Tamsin, your co-host, I'm going to introduce this wonderful person, is Muggie van Staden, who's the CEO of Obsidian. Welcome, Muggie.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
It is great to have you. So, Angela, I think you should kick off. Let's ask him a tough question.
I think I always wonder, because I've only been at Obsidian for just a little bit over a decade. We have a 30-year history, Muggie, and you've been at the helm for a lot of that time. What is some of the things that you see that is challenging us in today's world, and how are we utilizing that heritage and knowledge that we have occurred over the last 30 years?
Sure, interesting question. I think at the core of what we do is just open source, open standards, open solutions. And that hasn't changed in 30 years. We still believe in that is the only way that you can really solve problems long term. If you don't use open standards, you will very soon get yourself into a situation where you are locked in. And then if the next slight change in the problem comes along, you're stuck. So that's a big thing for us. Open source in itself, everything has changed, nothing has changed. Open source, we believe, is the... if you look at the world today, it runs the internet. It runs the world. There's so many Linux devices in the world, and that's the poster child of open source. We did some interesting stats a while ago, and there are more Linux devices than humans on Earth. It literally is everywhere.
That's amazing. So like how much, like billions, 7 billion, isn't that the population of the planet?
I think
that's crazy.
I'm doing it from memory, I think, and I did AI, we've got to talk about AI. So I asked ChatGPT or Gemini, I can't remember one of them, just how many Linux devices, and I think it was 11.5 billion it came back with. Because you have to understand, it's everywhere. It's in IoT devices, smartphones, TVs, and then servers, the internet, everything runs on Linux. So for us, it's kind of fun because 30 years ago when we started, most people thought open source was a joke. They said, how on earth do you want to start a company making money out of selling something that's free? So the first few years was basically that, telling people what open source is about, why it matters, and why we believe it is important, and why we stuck with it. And 30 years later, it's great to turn back and go, no, see, we told you.
I remember that first conversation when I walked into the door was about that BeeKeeper model. That was the first thing you said to me.
Yeah. And it's the BeeKeeper model is something that a guy called James Dixon, he was the CTO of Pentaho, a BI solution, open source one, and he wrote a fairly large article on the analogy of beekeepers to try and explain to people what open source and enterprise open source is all about. And it basically goes like this, that bees make honey, everybody knows that, but if you want to go into your favorite retail store and buy a bottle of honey, the bees will not give that to you. They do not understand the concept of a bottle. You can't go to them and say, here's $100, please give me a bottle of honey. All they do is make honey, and they're really good at it, right? The same with open source developers. That's what they do. They write code. But they don't care about, here's money, do the following. Where is the documentation? Is it certified? They don't understand that world. So what you need is a beekeeper that can keep the bees in a situation where they flourish, but give somebody that's willing to pay money for something the product in a way that they can consume it. So that is where the likes of Red Hat, SUSE, all of these guys come in. They take open source technology, they package it so that somebody is willing to pay money for it. And they are the beekeeper between the person buying the honey and the bees making the honey. And it was, for me, the best analogy I've ever heard to try and explain to somebody what open source and enterprise open source is all about.
It's a really good analogy, And it actually ties back to some of the conversations around open source and the value of the BeeKeeper model as it's positioned here, which is standards. So that when you work through your company or through a company that's packaging, bottling, open source, that specific standards are in place so that it will integrate, so it will work, so that you know what to expect. And that, I think, especially now with the onslaught of AI and all the different things that are changing the way business is done, is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in larger enterprises. You've got to know that my hardware is certified for the operating system, is certified for the application, because there are governance. They deal with people's lives, money, etc.
Yeah.
They can't just willy-nilly deploy something that doesn't have support, etc. So that certification stack is absolutely critical when it comes to enterprise open source. And yes, I can go and get something very similar out of the community, but I don't then tick all of my risk and compliance. And it's a big thing to just educate people that, yep, Linux is Linux, but there's a slight difference between the one you can just download off the internet and the one that you pay money for the big vendors. Just a little bit.
Totally difference. Yeah. I mean, actually, sort of expanding on what you were asking, Angela, and what you were saying, I think one of the things I'd like to know more about is you said that in the beginning you were still explaining, you had to explain that to everybody. Is that still persistent today, or has that changed? And people are now seeing open source on the same level as, like, you know, the closed source. What is a different word for that?
Proprietary.
Thank you very much. Proprietary systems. I don't know why I'm going closed and open, but there we go. Yeah, has that changed? Has that story changed? And if so, in which direction has it moved?
Yeah, it's luckily something we don't have to do anymore, but we really did for the first decade. We did a lot of talks on what is open source, can it be secure, why would you want to use it, all of those kind of things. I haven't had those questions in a long time.
Okay.
I think part of that is, I've mentioned before, open source is everywhere, and we also, the big Goliath proprietary companies have maybe adopted their own view on open source. So if you go back 20 years, you know, the likes of Microsoft, etc., they called Linux cancer and all of those kind of things. But now they've bought very large open source companies. So the one thing that has happened is that the world of proprietary and open source has blurred a little bit. So it is not as clear as it was 20 years ago. Now almost every proprietary vendor has some open source play, and some people would argue some of the open source vendors are starting to have proprietary plays. And that's where it's back to one of my first statements. The key thing is open standards. Yeah. It shouldn't matter if you can read the source code, change the source code. It's great if you can. But the critical thing is, whatever I am buying, taking off the net and deploying, is it an open standard, which means I can plug it into other things that are open standards. That, for me, is still the biggest message I can give everybody. It's not about open source or proprietary. The real focus is open standards, and you can get that both from proprietary and from open source, and vice versa. You can get really bad software from open source and bad software from proprietary that is completely lock-in standards. And that's the stuff that people should be scared of.
I agree. Yeah. Bad software. Very bad.
So, Muggie, with that in mind and the blurred lines and the changes in from what technology used to be, things have become so much more fast-paced, but also uncertain. There's a level of uncertainty that leaves many people going, what do I put my bet? Where do I place my bets now? What in the world of technology has changing, or Obsidian's perspective, what has that changed for you in terms of the people that you partner with, the vendors that we use?
I think once again it goes back to being open.
The open standards.
Yeah, absolutely. The reality is that you know, the world has never changed as fast as it is changing today, and it will never change as slow again. So we all have to realize tomorrow it's going to be even faster and even faster. So we will never, if you stop learning, you're behind. You have to carry on learning, and the same with technology. Tomorrow there's going to be different technology to what we have today. In a week's time, there might be something that blows AI out of the water, and we suddenly have a new buzzword that we all have to talk about. But if you focus on what are you actually trying to solve, and is it an open standard, I believe that gives you longevity. Lock-in and proprietary standards, I personally believe that's where people, whether it's a vendor forcing it down on a customer or a customer to making that choice. That's for me is the dangerous thing. That's what takes longevity away.
I laugh because I sometimes wonder in my role as marketing, people don't want to talk about things like Linux and infrastructure because they think it's not the buzzword of the day. But we know it to be critical at Obsidian. From your perspective, that longevity of that OS and what we do differently or what is our vision going forward for Obsidian?
Other than the open standards that I've
No, not about the open standards, but I mean just about the things we do on a day-to-day that keeps the world running. And people just write it off and they think, no, it's just, that stuff just happens.
Yeah. And for us, it's Linux. We've been doing Linux for 30 years. I don't think it's going to go away. Not everybody agrees with us because there's lots of other virtualization layers, container layers, serverless, etc. But the reality is Linux runs the world. It's not going to go away quickly. What we do well is help customers run that at scale. Whether it's 3 servers or 30,000 servers. We can help them to make sure it is deployed anywhere according to their governance standards, etc. It's secure, it's looked after. That is for us the core that we do because we believe it runs the world. So we're not going to waver from that. That is the core of who and what we are. And we love to do cool stuff around that, but that will still be our focus around it. The new worlds of automation, AI, yes, we'll see how all of that pans out, but that's where we go.
But the enabler is going to be that Linux layer.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. I mean, essentially, if it wasn't for open source, we wouldn't have AI as it stands today. So, that is the fundamental driver. And so, like the mainframe, Linux's death has been predicted so many times, right? Yeah, everyone's always saying the mainframe is dead. Mainframe's not dead. Mainframe is still going. Mainframe is actually evolving, and Linux is not dead. I know for a very long time when I worked in the proprietary software industry, and I won't name any names, Linux was like hiss, and the corridor was like, Linux, And now it's very much a critical part of most infrastructure, but also, and this is the thing that I find really interesting, it is a critical part of inspiration and brainstorming and creation, because it is a community where people challenge each other and find mistakes in each other's work. And that ethos is what makes it so interesting to see how that technology is going to evolve in the enterprise. Which leads me to my next question for you, which is really, what do you see is going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years? And I'm bringing it down from 5 because I think 5 years at the current pace of innovation is like predicting Back to the Future and flying cars, So what exactly are we looking at over the next 2 to 3 years in terms of how open source and the technologies and the standards are going to evolve to, to expand and create the space for AI and automation and these emergent technologies?
Yeah. Well, I think AI is probably the biggest buzzword at the moment. Every vendor, every customer, everybody's trying to figure out where do you use it, how to use it safely. I'm fairly sure that we're going to have an AI boo-boo, a big one very soon. It's inevitable.
Toddler.
Somebody's going to ask the wrong question and it's going to pop somebody's data out on the internet or something like that. It is kind of inevitable, and I think that's what most CIOs today lie awake about is everybody's using AI. Our kids, they're
just a little share button at the top there.
And if you think of, from kids at school to guys making really large financial decisions, it's all AI driven. And it's got to make sure that do those AI models have access to the correct data, the relevant data? I think that is the biggest thing that people are worrying about. And once again, open standards. I'm hoping that if you stick to the open standards, then there's at least a little bit of integration between all of the different things that are out there. But it's we're living in a fun time. I think it's
but challenging that. Sorry, I know I'm jumping in on you, but transparency, is that going to be greater than within the open source community and within the technologies you have? Because one of the biggest issues with AI obviously is the black box, and a lot of perception around the black box being you don't know where it was trained, you don't know what biases are inherent in it, et cetera, et cetera. And I had a really interesting conversation with a researcher about a year ago about she doesn't believe the black box exists. She thinks it's impossible to exist because you know where you know the data, you know what you've done. But I guess that transparency is going to be a huge. I think it's almost going to be a commodity going forward.
Yeah, I agree. Because you've got to know, because you also, you think you know where your AI model is getting its data, but do you know everybody that's been feeding it data? So I think transparency and openness is a key thing. And something always important to remember, there's a big difference between open and transparency. Anybody that's ever walked into a glass door will tell you the difference. So we need the transparency, but we also need the openness. Openness gives people the ability to, that's what makes open source so powerful, is to look for bugs. And if you find one, you share it with people to help fix it. The moment you start hiding things, that's when things can go wrong. So hopefully sanity prevails.
Yeah, I agree. And that again comes down to standards.
Yep.
You know?
Now, a lot of people are trying to build their own, and they're spending a ton of money, a lot of effort, and they're attempting to do this in isolation of everyone else. But what are your thoughts around taking on that task of building your own kind of AI?
So for me, it depends on the context. So I think if I were in charge of a large enterprise today, I think most of them are trying to build their own models based on their data. And that absolutely makes sense. That's extremely powerful machine learning to get answers really quickly. And I think that's what most enterprises will want to focus on, is to make sure that their AI models are their data. It's not being trained on somebody else's data. Very importantly, that their data is not being sent somewhere else. And I think that's a big thing. So a lot of people sometimes confuse. I mean, we all have ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and all of these things that we all access, and that's trained on a whole bunch of data. But for the big enterprises, it's difficult because ChatGPT gives you a generic answer, not a contextualized answer. And I think that's where a lot of the vendors are driving, helping customers to get to the point where we can go, well, we will help you get AI models and AI-like behavior, but on your contextualized data, and it's nice and safe. Oh, and by the way, if you want to bring your own LLM, we can plug that in. And I think that's what most enterprises are trying to figure out. But the reality is they have users fiddle on ChatGPT. I'm personally worried that there's lots of people out there that are taking very sensitive data and plugging it into their home ChatGPT.
Yeah, though. It is. It's a thing.
It's the human.
And yep, it's what people do. So I think those are the things that from a governance point of view, I think a lot of people are very nervous about, is that their data gets out, and people won't do it maliciously.
No, it's just we don't understand the consequences. Somebody sitting in legal or in HR or in anywhere else in the organization, they don't have that context.
They don't know what a walled garden is. They don't understand that you need to operate your data within that walled garden, and that is a real challenge. It's like the difference between AIEO and AEO, which is, the AEO is obviously building your own internal database with your own internal search engine, where AIEO is what you're going to get from ChatGPT.
And when to use which one.
Yes, exactly.
And that I think is the big challenge for everybody.
Yeah, it's a big thing. Yeah. So I know that we did talk earlier, and we really were quite focused on digging into VUCA. There was conflict around VUCA, but I do think you should tell us what it is.
Putting me on the spot.
I know.
I thought that would make us think a little bit about how we see Obsidian and what role we play in South Africa's industry. The volatility, uncertainty, and where we're wanting to change the dialogue from all of those things that our clients and customers are facing. Right?
Into something where they have control.
Into that. I don't think any human in any role in any company wants to feel that way. It's fearful. You know, some days you just do one little thing and you have the blood drains from you, or you get sucker punched in the stomach to say, oh my goodness, have we made a big error? Have we let the cat out of the bag in any kind of business context, right? So where do we see ourselves as Obsidian and how we're helping customers overcome those challenges?
So I'm sounding like a stuck record, but open standards. I think what happened recently is the geopolitical landscape made a lot of people go, what if South Africa was declared an embargo country? From an American point of view. Suddenly everybody in South Africa that's got anything in the cloud has a challenge, because if America decides that we are not allowed that technology, where do we go? So I think for a lot of South African companies, that is a big vulnerability and a stress factor, because it's something that you cannot control. It is not within our control that America decides to be upset with our country and block us completely. And for the first time, I've had some customers go, do you have alternatives to American technology? Wow. And that's a
big game changer.
That is a huge game changer.
Because they have to go. Everybody talks about multi-cloud, but I think for the first time they're thinking multi-cloud because of geopolitical reasons. Now you're not talking about 3 American clouds. Suddenly that's not multi-cloud. As you have to start thinking about a cloud provider that's not American. So that's something that I think is a big vulnerability and a stress factor in IT, and not a lot of people are talking about it because it's quite scary. If Mr. Trump decides to wake up and go,
we're going to embargo in South Africa.
South Africa's
and you're not allowed our technology. It is a fundamental game changer right then and there.
It's almost trauma from the past, right?
Yeah.
When we're completely cut off, where do we go to next?
But the big difference is now everything is in most people have workloads in the cloud. Is where do you go? Do you pull them back? Do you pull them back on-prem? If you really embargo, you can't, because we won't have any American hardware at our disposal. So I think for the first time, a lot of our customers, especially the large ones, are really going, do we have a viable DR strategy, meaning America technology is potentially our production site that's gone down, we cannot use it again, where do we go? So that's a very large thing that we starting to talk to customers and go, and once again, if you have everything open standards, it makes a move like that potentially easier. We would say if you're running Linux everywhere, it makes it a lot easier. But
it's even the partners that we pick up,
absolutely.
The vendors that we use every day, that we also advise our customers to use, right? That dialogue is also open, because they also have to be aware, and they're probably not thinking about that either.
Yeah. And we're seeing some of the European vendors in their slideshows specifically say proudly European. Because they know that the geopolitical fallout in the world can have a massive effect on how people are purchasing.
That is such a fundamental change. It is just.
It's very scary.
This is the actual definition of the word game changer.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Not the press release one.
Yep.
Yeah. So my question to you on that actually is, this feels like it has value for South Africa as well. Because at the moment, there's a lot of outflow of capital to America because we're paying for those services. Does this, despite the disruption initially, allow us to really focus on, prioritize and embed African, local and other innovation that could potentially change the economic structure of the country, where we could potentially become more and then end up selling what we have outside, moving it out?
Absolutely. I believe so. And that's also when we engage with our customers, one of the things we like to talk about is there's always vendor lock-in. You try to avoid it, but you have to lock into something. And we believe you should lock into abstraction layers. So you spoke about the mainframe earlier. So the one amazing thing about Linux is it runs on everything from the smallest Raspberry Pi to fridges all the way to a mainframe. And that's the power of open source, because it takes something that was commoditized, but those that want to can specialize and take the same commodity product and make it work on a mainframe or make it work on a Raspberry Pi. Now, nobody will do that for a Unix or for a Microsoft system, because number one, they don't have access to the code. So that's the big thing. But that abstraction layer of I can run Linux everywhere, that's the kind of thing that my advice to anybody would be, is that if you have to lock in. So lock into abstraction layers, into something that you can go, I can take this and run it everywhere. So now it gives you an idea of there are certain Linux versions and distributions that you cannot run everywhere. They're only made by a specific cloud vendor, as an example. So that already tells you that if you are trying to de-risk from geopolitical stuff and you want to get into an abstraction layer, it gives you immediately an answer. You've got to start saying no to certain things. It might be cheaper, but there's risk that's not as obvious, because most of the cloud vendors will go and say, come use our stuff, it's Hotel California, it's you can check in but you can never leave. And that first hit is always free, so it's a terrible analogy.
Such a great analogy. No, it is a great analogy. I've just got it.
But no, we saw it.
Do you want to touch my software?
but that's the thing, and they're always very quick to help you get in. And I always say to customers, any vendor is you should immediately go and ask, if I want to leave, how difficult is it? Tell me that rather than tell me how I can get in there, because that is what de-risks your organization. So our advice for anybody, if you really want to de-risk from what we just spoke about, the geopolitical fallout, is look for ways of abstracting your technology, that you can go, I'm running an operating system that can run anywhere. I can't be told, and unfortunately a lot of the large distributions are American-based, but those are the kinds of things that you have to start thinking about a little bit. So not all of the vendors are going to like what I'm saying on the podcast, but if our customers want to de-risk from that, those are the kinds of questions they're going to have to start asking. What database do I buy? The one that is by the cloud vendor? It's cheaper, it's faster, it's better, but I can't run it in another geopolitical environment. Do I go and pay for a very expensive proprietary one? Oh, but wait, that's an American company. So if you start thinking of it, and it is scary, because I don't think South Africans have ever thought like that, because we trust America. We trust the technology that they bring. It's always the best, right? But if for some reason that none of us can control, that situation would change, that we're not allowed to run it, is do we have an alternative? And I think some of our customers need to start thinking about that. Hopefully we never get to that point. But it won't be a bad thing to be in a position where you could go, it's okay, I don't need that specific geopolitical technology. I can run anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter who is underpinning it.
And that has value globally, because it's not just going to be an isolated case, It's going to
Everybody's at risk today.
Everybody.
It's
and it's not
Africa.
necessarily America cutting off South Africa. It could be anyone cutting off anybody at any point, for political gain. That is such an interesting conversation. Worrying, But so thanks for that.
We like to make listeners think.
We do.
We hope to make you think.
And hosts also now thinking a lot. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
But that's brilliant. So I do have one last question, and I'm sure you have one last question too. But my last question to you is, what industry pain points are the most exciting for you right now? I mean, I know we're making pain exciting, but it is for solving.
One of the things at the moment I enjoy talking to customers about is governance. Scary thing, but we have a couple of new standards that were propagated in South Africa, joint standards around backups and configurations, and the other one is around security. And I find it fascinating to engage with customers around that, to go and say, number one, are you aware of this? Number two, what have you done about this? And then the most important bit is have you done this for all your technology? And the interesting fact is that most of them will go and say, we've done it for on-prem, and then when you say, but what about software as a service? And then you can see they're kind of, should we? And I'm like, well, my reading of the standard is you should. And it's a very interesting discussion, and it's got nothing to do with Linux per se or anything like that, but it's just getting them to realize that a lot of people have software as a service. They almost give away the responsibility. I'm paying somebody else for the responsibility. And when they realize, but something as basic as backups, those guys don't back it up. It's a joint responsibility. And I've had people argue and go, but it's not. And I go, well, go read your contract. And then when they realize that most of the software as a service platform providers, they will back it up and provide DR and availability, but they won't back up your data so that if there's a boo-boo, you can restore it. You have to do that. And if they understand the joint standards, that's one thing that they suddenly realize, we are not backing up that. So that's a very interesting discussion for me at the moment, and the same with configuration management. So most organizations, if you deploy new software on your mobile app, they will have a full SDLC process on everything from the configuration, where was the code, etc. And once again, if we flip that to a software as a service world and we go, your configuration of your software as a service, do you have that version controlled? And most of them go, no, because once again, they assume it's being done by somebody else. So that's a very interesting discussion I'm having with some of the larger clients at the moment.
No, it just goes to show, never assume. No, especially when it comes to backup. Definitely not. Angela.
I would love Muggie to tell what's exciting him most within the Obsidian teams and what we're doing in terms of joining some dots and the vision that Obsidian brings and value that we add.
Yeah. So what I fundamentally love about us, we like to solve problems. I always try to remind the team that doesn't matter what a customer asks, you first have to go and say, but why do you want that? Because we have it so many times, somebody will come and say, I want 4 of these. And salesperson, human nature is, there's the quote. Thank you. Done.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you sure you don't want 5?
Target made. But the right thing should be, why do you think you need 4 and 4 of these? So that we can understand what are we solving. Because otherwise you could give the guy a screwdriver when actually he needs a hammer, but he heard he needs a screwdriver. And it's critical in anything, and that can be from the most simplistic to the most complex problems that customers have, is to really get back to, I don't want to sell you something, I want to solve a problem. So yes, maybe something that I sell can solve the problem, but the key thing is, how do we solve the problem? That's the value that we bring. We like solving problems with open standards. We love solving problems with the ability of connecting dots. So we are lucky enough to represent some very large international vendors. And a big value add that we hopefully giving our customers is, you are running vendor A and vendor B, but did you know that if you do this between them, you can get so much more value? And the crazy thing is, vendor A and vendor B don't even know about each other. They're kind of aware, but that's not their focus. Their focus is, how do you get the value out of this thing, and this guy's focusing, right? So big thing that we're focusing on now is to all of our banking customers. You're buying this, and it might not even be from us, but you've got this technology, you've got this technology. Did you know that they can work together? And suddenly you get magic. And did you know that if you plug this one to this one? And it's helping them connect dots with technology that they've already procured. So we're not saying spend more money, but get the value out of what you've spent. And that's a big focus for us. People don't always believe us because, we're supposed to sell stuff, right? And sometimes I really don't want to sell you something. I want you to just get value out of, you spent millions on technology, but you're not harnessing half of it. It's like, buying a Ferrari and driving like Miss Daisy. It's just, it doesn't work.
You're still in a Ferrari.
I was just about to say that Ferrari is still getting the glances on the road.
Just because I can't use the clutch doesn't mean
even if you're stuck in traffic. Even if you're stuck in traffic, it gives people time to have a look.
You're still looking good.
Yeah. That's great.
Thank you, Muggie. I think I'm going to wrap that up to say that this podcast series is different. It's not a push of a technology or a solution, but it's the connection between the different areas of expertise that we have built up over the years and the partnerships that we've built up over the years and the cool things that our consultants and our technical folks are playing with and joining the dots. So that's what this podcast is going to be about. And always with Muggie at the helm with open standards. Thank you, Muggie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.